that's that comes forward that has potential good draws a few crazies and a few geniuses. So you have the two extremes coming in there at all times, it seems like. Okay, my friends, let's move on to the class. We've been talking about the fall of Babylon, and we're approaching a description of its fall. And this is probably the longest quote that I'll read, but it needs to be looked at in its entirety to get the picture of the description of the fall of Babylon. So here goes, bear with me. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. Reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her double according to her works. In the cup which she hath filled, filled to her double. How much has she glorified herself and lived deliciously? So much torment and sorrow give her. For she saith in her heart, I sit as a queen and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God that judgeth her. And the kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her shall bewail her and lament her when they shall see the smoke of her burning, standing afar off for fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise anymore. The merchandise of gold and of silver and of precious stones and of pearls and of fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet and all fine wood and all manner of vessels and of ivory, all manner of most precious wood and of brass and iron and marble and cinnamon and odors and ointments and frankincense and wine and oil and fine flour and wheat and beasts and sheep and horses and chariots and slaves and souls of men, and the fruits of thine soul lusted after or departed from thee, and all things which were dainty and goodly are departed from thee, and thou shalt find them no more at all. The merchants of these things, which were made rich by her, shall stand afar off for fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, for in 1 hour so great riches come to naught. And every shipmaster and all the company and the ships and the sailors and as many as trade by sea stood afar off, and they cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What city is like unto this great city? And they cast dust on their heads and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city wherein we were made rich, and all that had ships in the sea by reason of their coastlines, for in 1 hour is she made desolate. Rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for God hath avenged you on her. And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence shall the great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. And the voice of harpers and musicians and pipers and trumpeters shall be heard no more at all in thee, and no craftsman of whatever craft shall be found any more in thee, and the sound of the millstone shall be heard no more at all in thee, and the light of the candle shall shine no more in thee, and the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth, and by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. For in her was found the blood of all the prophets and the saints and all that were slain upon the earth. That's quite a description there of the fall of Babylon. Now, we have to remember what Babylon is. Babylon is the misuse of money, sex, and power. And money is the key focus of Babylon, the incorrect use of money. And it says, it makes this key statement that we did mention earlier, that in Babylon was found the blood of all the righteous people that were shed upon the earth. And this this happens because when you have people in power, that their main focus is getting money and power and then misusing sex energy. They have the focus on this, and someone comes and proposes any threat to them, they will have them killed if at all possible, if they, if they think they can get away with it. And so this has been this way from the beginning. This is why it says, in Babylon was found the blood of the prophets and the saints, the people, the righteous people that have been killed, because the righteous people in history have always taught the importance of the right use of sex, money, and power. And the people that are in power through sex, money, and power don't want their power base threatened. So if anyone threatens it at all, they will take action to either imprison them or have them killed or have them neutralized in any way that they think they can get away with. Now, fortunately, in this day and age, we have laws in place that protect us to some degree, not 100% by any means, but we're protected from things, from having like witches burned at the stake and that type of thing, or heretics burned at the stake, like in the Middle Ages. So the heretics in the past, in from almost every age before this one, could be burnt right, put to death right in the public square. And that provided a lot of public entertainment. The whole town had come out to see somebody get burned at the stake or impaled or whatever. That was public entertainment in the old ages. But fortunately, laws, people have been evolved, so laws are in place. So those who have the power threatened have to superficially at least obey the laws and do things under the table. Uh, for instance, there were some stories just a year or two ago about a whole bunch of natural healers just defying all statistics, that they wound up mysteriously killed. And these natural healers were threatening the pharmaceutical industry because, they presented ways of healing that didn't cost people a bunch of money for all the drugs and medical supplies. So they threatened the power base and the money base of the powers that be. And there was like quite a large number, several dozen of them just mysteriously committed suicide or some crazy thing, had accidents. And there was several articles about this, but nobody did anything about it except put the fear of God into the natural healers to you don't threaten the powers that be, or this could happen to you. And so all this was done under the table. Nobody got prosecuted for it. And but it's obvious that there was something under the radar done to these natural healers. I don't know if this is still ongoing. It was been a couple of years ago I read about it. But anybody else heard about that situation? A whole bunch of natural healers just mysteriously getting
I
killed.
heard about it, but that was a couple of years ago. But you better watch out, Emmanuel.
It happens all the time, actually. These people that stands up and gives an yeah, a possibility to cure cancer and all this really deadly um, uh, how do you say it? I'm forgetting my English.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Well,
happening.
years ago when I was in real estate, I had a client come to me. He had this gold mine that he wanted to sell, and he told me his story that he developed a cure for cancer. He was in his story. He was in veterinary school, and he was assigned to. Everybody had to come up with a project, a research project of some kind. So he come up. His idea was to come up with a cure for tumors in animals or something. So he got together with another student and they experimented with it and they come up with an actual cure that involved a large number of herbs. I think he said there was about 80 altogether that they put together and it actually worked. And then he wondered, well, could a human take this successfully? So he tested it on himself and didn't do him any damage. And then he started testing it on individuals, and it worked. And he started promoting it, and he got thrown in jail over it. And then after he got out of jail, he started working underground, and he had a number of doctors he said he worked with that under the table for patients that could be cured. He said he didn't get anyone referred to him unless they were really near death because he was the last resort. He said if he could catch a patient within 2 weeks of dying of cancer, his formula could cure him.
Yeah,
And
JJ, I have three really quick 30-second examples here. One is my mother who did immunotherapy, which is more popular now in America, but back in 2011, you couldn't do clinical trials with immunotherapy. And so she was one of the board members of Immunophotonics, and she would do clinical trials on Peruvian clients but she basically would scoop them off the street. They had no money to their name, and it was illegal for you to do clinical trials unless you had stage four, because the mafia runs uh, basically chemotherapy over in Peru. So that's just one sign of it. The second one is my friend Dr. Scott Werner, who I've told you about, JJ. Um, the way he was introduced to the deep state was that he realized that many people in Intermountain America, or not Intermountain, it's Intermountain Health or the hospital. He worked for them, and he didn't think that C sections were so necessary. They were looking at his percentage of how many people have done C sections with him as OBGYN, and his rate was the lowest. And because of that, they raided his office, and then they took him into an underground tunnel, and they found ways to basically put him in jail. And he said when he went to that jail, he knew a ton of his holistic friends that were in there for committing no crime, but they would try to find a crime like insurance fraud or something on them, so that way they don't come back to their practice. And so he was a good friend of mine too. And the last one I did find the article. I think it was 300 holistic practitioners were kind of killed mysteriously. One of them, like they drowned in a river, or a friend accidentally shot them, and they were all very strange, obscure things. I'm like, that just doesn't sound right. Like he was on the top of his career, but he decided to hang himself in the garage. Like that's just kind of bizarre. And I remember posting that once, and somebody was fighting against me and just really being nasty towards me. And she used Snopes to try to convince me that it wasn't right. And we all know who runs Snopes. So anyway,
yeah,
those are my three examples.
yeah, yeah. It's the powers that be are very protective. And like I say, this the Babylon are those forces that are trying to secure the money, sex, and power for in the direction of serving the lower self. And the lower self doesn't want to release its hold on these energies. And the fall of Babylon that we just read about happens on two different levels. One on the level of the disciple himself, when he switches and comes to the realization that the energies that he has of sex, money, and power needs to be diverted or aimed toward the higher self, toward service of humanity rather than the lower self. And when this switch comes, then you have the fall of Babylon. And Babylon represents the misuse of those energies. And after Babylon falls, it tells us a little later that then we become the bride of Christ. So we become the bride of Christ when we let go of the whore, which is Babylon, the misuse of the female energy, replaced by the right use. Then we become a candidate to become a bride, so to speak. So we have that personal fall of Babylon, and when the disciple gets that internal revelation and makes that change, he doesn't make it just in piecemeal. He makes it all at one time. And when he makes it, then the whole past, his whole past of devoting himself to serving the lower self shifts to the higher self, and that shift creates an internal fall of the misuse of energies, so that they just are not there anymore. And when this happens, it talks about there will be great lament that no man buyeth their merchandise anymore. The person will lose friends and family and associates because they will think, boy, this guy isn't like he used to be. He used to be a regular guy. Now he's kind of into this spiritual stuff.
He's no fun anymore. Won't go out and get drunk with me.
Yeah, he won't go chase women and all these things. Yeah, but now it's also a representation of the physical fall. The ancient Babylon had a fall, and it did not rise again. So this is used as an example of the spiritual Babylon. And in the days of John, what represented Babylon more to him than anything else was the Roman Empire. Now, the Roman Empire eventually did fall, but it didn't fall quite as described there. But it did fall, and it hasn't rose again. The modern example of Babylon is many, and this is something that actual ordinary interpretation of this is that it could be like the United States or New York. New York sits on the waters the way the ancient city Babylon did, and it's the financial capital of the world. And then the United States is also kind of corresponds to Babylon in that it's the capitalistic system of the world. And we use some of the money for good, but most of it's dedicated for serving the lower self. We don't have very few bankers and billionaires dedicating their money for the service of humanity. It's and as evidence of this is no matter how corrupt a financial opportunity is, if there's money to be made, it doesn't matter how much harm can be created by the enterprise, you will have a lot of people gravitating to it and supporting it if there's money to be made. Now, if there's money to be made, oftentimes it's a beneficial thing, but quite often there is harm in there. Like, well, let's take prostitution, for instance. A lot of money to be made in prostitution. And most people figure that's not a good thing to do. Yet there's no shortage of people entering that profession or management in that profession and manipulating of that profession. Yeah, you never have a shortage of people coming in there because of the money involved. Same thing with drugs. Drugs that cause many deaths. There's money because there's money to be made. There's people will just gravitate to it, even though they know it harms men, women, and children. They just tune that out because of the money to be made. And so this is Babylon is they follow the money, good or bad, without thinking of the repercussions. And but sex, money, and power are not by themselves are neutral, and they can be directed toward good or evil. And the fall of Babylon isn't the elimination of sex, money, and power, but it's the redirection from the lower to the higher. So we redirect that energy to the benevolent sources. So money can be directed to either a war or this killing or prostitution, or it can be directed toward healing and service and feeding the poor and elevating people to a higher level. Sex can be a wonderful thing, or it can be completely misused. And power itself is the same thing. Once a person gets power, he has the ability to do wonderful things or some very bad things. Okay, any more comments on that direction?
Like you say, it happens in a flash. You just get an aha. Like when I used to drink a lot of beer 10 years ago, and then a few things happened, and all of a sudden I just lost my appetite for it and quit doing drugs. No more meth, no more fentanyl, quit cocaine.
Yeah.
Oh, I never did any fentanyl. I don't even know where to buy it in New Plymouth, but just all of a sudden you get an aha and you do a spiritual shift. And I'll bet everybody here has at one time, and I know Sydney has, at one time or another just gone through that spiritual awakening, and Babylon, the lower aspects are just destroyed.
Yeah.
The thirst for it has just been quenched.
Okay, my friends, the next verses say this, and he saith unto them, take heed and beware of covetousness, for a man's life consisteth. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, yeah, this isn't Revelation. This is a verse I have noticed from that kind of makes the point that is from one of the parables of Jesus. And he said this, take heed, beware of covetousness, for a man's life consisteth not in abundance of the things which he possesses. And he spake a parable unto them, saying, a ground of a certain rich man brought forth plentifully. And he thought within himself, saying, what shall I do? Because I have no room from whence to bestow my fruit. And he said, this will I do. I will pull down my barns and build greater. And I will bestow all my, there will I bestow all my fruits and goods. And I will say to my soul, So though thou hast much goods laid up for many years, take thine ease, eat, drink, and be merry. And God said unto him, Thou fool, this night thy soul shall be required of thee. And whence shall these things be which thou hast provided? So is he that layeth up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. So this is kind of an example of the person that's tuned into the riches of Babylon. He thinks, I'm going to take care of myself with this abundance. I'm going to dedicate it so I can just eat, drink, and be merry. And he had no thought of using his power to benefit anyone but himself. So this parable is a great example of the power of Babylon over the regular person. And the average person out there, everything, all the work he does is pretty much for himself. And that's just the way it is for until he reaches that point. Now, we don't want to condemn that person because we all go through that period in our evolution where we dedicate everything to taking care of the lower self. For the center of that lower self is the physical body itself. We are forced to put quite a bit of attention on taking care of our physical body, because if we don't, we get sick, or it's not housed properly, or it's not fed properly. So we're forced to put a lot of attention on the lower self, and it takes an act of will to switch from the lower to the higher, because the natural forces, the going with the flow, so to speak, all gravitates toward taking care of the lower nature and nurturing it and making sure it survives. And but then Jesus made this interesting statement that he that seeks to save his life shall lose it, but he that will lose his life for my sake shall save it. So that's an interesting statement in the fact that by serving Babylon, we think we're saving our life, but in the end, we hear the voice of God saying, Thou fool, the soul will be required of thee. And then where are those riches that you saved up for yourself? You could have used them to create riches in heaven. And when that shift of attention happens, then Babylon falls.
Don't you think, Joe, do you think that tithing was instituted partially to teach people how to share, even if it's just 10% of what they make, so they can learn to let go of just a small portion?
Yeah, that's true. And but what's interesting also is Babylon secures its power because we focus our attention on taking care of the self. And taking care of the self is natural. Even of Jesus, it was written that he sought the cross because of the joy product that he would have. So, but the difference is, do we take care of the false self or the true self? If you take care of the false self, then you focus on you as an individual and nothing else, pretty much. What that individual, how that individual benefits is where you put your energy. When you see your true self, then you identify with all the souls of men, and then you realize that if you put your attention on the lower self only, the individual self, then you eventually hear the voice of God say, "Thou fool." You put your attention on the wrong thing. But when we put our attention on our true self, then we realize if we benefit the whole, we also benefit ourselves, but on a permanent basis, not a temporary basis. When we're trapped in the trap of Babylon, we all the benefits of self are temporary, but we shift and we put our attention on wholeness, then the benefits become permanent. And so the benefits are actually greater for self when after Babylon falls, because we're doing it for our real self rather than our false self. Okay. Any more comment on that?
Well, that's the power of the kingdom. Everyone contributes and then it comes back, tenfold. There's just tremendous power in the gathering principle that people learn how to share. What's mine's yours, what's yours is mine. I have a Corvette. If anybody wants to come drive it, come on over.
Yeah, an interesting point is that we definitely need money to survive. And the poor, the rich kind of get a bad rap in the fact that to become wealthy isn't really bad, because to become wealthy, you have to help quite a few people to obtain wealth also. Like Elon Musk, I think, employs over 100,000 people, and these people make a lot of money themselves, and so they get a lot of benefit. So, but on the other hand, let's look at the poor guy. Poor people fall into two categories. One is a person that's just down on his luck on a temporary basis, but he's willing to work, he's willing to forge ahead, but he's just having a rough time. That person deserves help. But then there's the person that is like poor in consciousness, and he is maybe lazy, well, not willing to do what's necessary to get ahead, and he expects everybody to help him out. Now, there's a scripture that says, "He that is not willing to work uh, should not be fed." So, indicating that yeah, we should help the poor, but the poor should be willing to help themselves. And what's interesting about the poverty consciousness of the poor is that what happens when they get a break and they win the lottery? Have you guys heard stories about these guys that win the lottery and then a couple of years later they almost curse the fact that they won? Yeah. This guy named John Whittimer won the $315 million in 2002. And within, he started splurging, sharing the wealth with his family and friends, and then they come back to him and they want more money later, and then he gives them a little bit more, and then he after a while he cuts them off, and then they get mad at him. And within a couple of years, he lost the whole shebang, and he cursed the day that he won that money. He said, if I had to do over, I would have torn up the lottery ticket. But they figure some studies show that like 70% of these big lottery winners curse the day that they won the lottery. They lose it all, and their life is worse off afterwards. And it's because they have this poverty consciousness about them. They don't have the consciousness necessary to get out of it. And so this is the class of poor that kind of needs to be forced into taking care of themselves. In other words, instead of enabling them, we need to put them in a situation, hey, you need to do what you can to take care of yourself. Now, on the other hand, the other class that just is doing their best, but just having a hard time, they deserve to have some help because they're doing what they can. But this other class of poor, they just have a consciousness, and they don't deserve. I don't think they deserve to be looked upon as righteous, because they're just they haven't done their part to alleviate their problem. But then like I say, then there are others that are deserving of help when they do all they can for themselves. And
On
so,
the other hand, there are a lot of people that okay, say you become a millionaire and you lose it, and then you have nothing, but you have that millionaire consciousness. In another year or two, you've got $1 million back. So, it works both ways. If you develop that consciousness that everything that I need is at hand, then you see that you become rich in the here and now. That's just another side note, but it's all about your consciousness, I think.
yeah, there's certain rich men I know about that lost pretty much everything they had. Matter of fact, Trump is an example. He's faced bankruptcy several times and come out on top. And Musk has come very close too a couple of times, and he came back on top. And I read about Napoleon Hill talks about this in his books, how some people they have that consciousness that if they're defeated, and they lose everything, they're still able to come back and do it all over again. But the ability that is gained to master our circumstances, that's more important than having a bunch of money to begin with. And so, and then to direct it in the right way in the service of humanity itself. This is where almost all the really rich people and powerful people of the world are really into the lower self. What do these people do when they start making a bundle of money? They first of all get a mansion for themselves, and then one mansion isn't enough, so they get a couple, and then they get a yacht, and then they get a bigger yacht, and they all follow this same pattern just about. And then once in a while, you find somebody that wants to do something benevolent with their power, and their Babylon begins to fall. So let us have our personal Babylon fall and dedicate ourselves to the new age of peace, love, brotherhood, joy, all the good things of the Spirit.
Amen.
Okay, my